All right, part 2 of working on our animal pictures. And this is where you should be right now. And then there's my reference picture. Okay, here we go. You'll need all your charcoal supplies. I'm going to switch the camera so that you can see how to do part 2. All right, so we're ready to go. And I am going to use my charcoal pencil now. If you have trouble sharpening them, they break really easily if you have just a inexpensive sharpener. Sometimes instead of using the one that's the size of the pencil, the hole that's the size of the pencil, maybe use the larger one and just be very careful as you're turning it around so that you can get it a little bit sharper on the end. Get some finer detail out of it. This is where you could also use your square, your compressed charcoal if you have some bigger, darker areas, because I'm going to go find the places where I see either deeper shadows or parts where his hair is a little bit darker. So have your reference picture in front of you. You need to have your reference picture. This is important. If you did not pull, if you did not pull that vine charcoal in far enough, this is a point where you could do that as well, because you want that foundation. So the way to do that is, if you made that line and you made it too thin, you can color it out a little bit further. Take your Q-tip or whatever it was that you were smearing it with, pull it so that it goes more towards the center. I'm still leaving some of my paper showing. I am keeping in mind how the prehistoric artists were able to do this. One of the ways was that they let the rock show through, so I'm letting my paper show through as being part of the animal. And the other thing is that I'm filling him in a little bit to put this base down so that I can go back and make the details like they did. We might not be doing it exactly, but we're using some of their methods of it. So I'm gonna take my compressed charcoal and get some of the areas where I see that it becomes a little bit darker. All right, and just start to go back in. And you don't have to blend it in yet. You can if you want, a little bit at a time, but I'm gonna go catch some of those areas where I see it. And I'm still not making a lot of fine detail. I'm just looking for the dark areas now, so I can lay some of those deeper shadows in. Now that we're done with that, I need to blend that in before I can go back and add any details to it. So, or make anything else in my picture for that matter. So I have a couple of choices. I actually have a paper stump, which is a piece of paper rolled up really tight, or paper pressed to be really tight together. You can make your own one if you want to, if you're having trouble blending it with a Q-tip, because it doesn't. I just twisted a piece of old paper and made it come to more of a point. Other than that, you can use your Q-tip for the bigger areas, but it's kind of hard to get along the edge sometimes with a Q-tip, especially depending on how small that your animal is. So I'm going to blend those dark areas in now, and if you overdo it, you can always take your eraser and pull some of it back off. And then we want to make some of our details into that. All right, so just pull it around. As you can see, we've got it blended out. It has a very soft look to it, and it's starting to look more like what I need it to look like my box. So from here, what I would like to do is I would like to go back and make some of my finer details. And I'm going to use my charcoal pencil for that. So make sure that it has a sharpened tip to it, and you can add as much texture to it as you want. And if you may have noticed, if you used your compressed charcoal, it has a little bit rougher look to it. So if you're not wanting that, especially if it's something that has a smoother surface, you may want to do all your darker areas with your charcoal pencil. All right, so make sure that you're keeping this clean as you go along. I keep laying down this paper towel so I don't get stuff all over, you know, smear it. But I want to go back in and I want to make his nose and his eyes and a little bit of some of the texture of his fur without maybe making all of it. I want to give indications of areas that are lighter too. And I'm going to go back and I'm actually going to take some back off. Then that's something that you can think about too. Like if you have some lighter areas and it became too dark, that's all right. We're going to pull some of it back out with our eraser. I work back and forth between the eraser and using my different pencils. So I'm going to darken his eye in there and pull that little line out. And we can blend these again too. I'm going to darken in his nose. Just think that too, when things are rounded, usually they have shadows, especially on the bottom side. It depends on where your light source is coming from, or you can change this to be, you know, the lighting in the direction that you want it. Just because you're using that picture doesn't mean that you don't have the liberty of changing it up a little bit. You'll see that I do that from time to time. All right, so I'm going to add a little bit of texture right through here just to give the indication of which way, the direction of the lines. And you may like it soft and not do that at all. And I'll go back and I'll blend it in later on. I'm going to put it where his face kind of separates from the rest of him, right here. And then where it's light, I'm going to go back and pull that out. Some of it, not all of it. All right. I want him to look kind of shaggy, so I'm putting some indication, but remember, go the direction that your animal fur goes. If you have fur, or if it's scales or whatever, then you need to follow along with that. I'm gonna leave some of that lighter. I like that lighter area right there. I think it looks nice. Just put a few lines in there, make it look a little shaggy. Here we go. So I'm gonna continue on with that. Now that we have filled it in, gave it a little bit of texture, I am going to go back in and clean up edges, any edges that I have with my eraser, and just clean your eraser off. Take paper towel, piece of material, whatever you need to do to clean the edge off. You can even take a piece of paper, an old piece of paper. I'm just gonna wipe it off over here, kind of rub it off, there. I'm going to use my charcoal pencil too to think about line variation. So instead of making a heavy outline, I want to emphasize some areas and clean up a few edges. If you press down on your pencil too hard, the pencil lines may show, so you may have to get rid of some of your pencil lines. I was trying to be cognizant of that, but I still see a few, so hopefully I can hide that with my charcoal pencil. All right, so let's go back in and define some areas. So I'm going to pull, and I'm not going to blend this out. I'm just going to leave some of these to be some darker areas in there. It's nice to make some strong areas. Now, if you can't see the feet or the bottom of your animal, leave that area open so that we can go back and put in a little bit of background or a little bit of area around them. Okay, I'm going to just, hopefully I can work that line out a little bit. I'm just going to put a couple of strong edges in here to show where his fur is. Not everywhere, just a few areas. I don't want that heavy cartoon look, that outline area. Maybe I'll go back in here into his back. It's kind of a hit and miss process. There we go. Try to keep your hand or your arm out of that. I can go back in and define his eye a little bit more if I want, or his nose. And pull a couple whiskers out. Now it's light under his neck, so I don't want to touch that too much. There. Like I said, you don't have to do it exactly like the picture. I'm kind of using that for a reference at this point and changing it the way I like to make it. I'm trying to get him to stand out from the paper too. So this would be where you can go back in and you can clean up some of your lines. Or if you see some smears, it's a good time to clean it up. I don't want it smeared outside of him. That wouldn't make any sense for my picture. Everything needs to be cleaned up. Don't wipe your hand across it. And you probably saw me kind of brush off a couple places. That's probably the easiest way to clean it off. Or if you have a little brush, sometimes at school we would have had brushes, but since we're home, there. Okay. There we go. All right, so if you can get to that spot, you will be good. I have one here that has, I've started a little bit differently. And as you can see, because he does not take up so much space on my paper, I am adding a little bit around him. So kind of think about, you know, what else you could add if you have a very small area and you don't have a lot to your animal, like it's not taking up the space well enough. How we can plan for that, either making one or, you know, and things around it, or you could do the animal again, trace it again, have it in a series or a succession, and then we'll talk about how to deal with the background part later if you need to. Right, I'm going to stop right there.